pretty much every time before I talk, I kind of cover my bases a little bit so everybody knows where I'm coming from. In 2021, I felt like God really started to challenge me to walk in obedience to what He tells me to do. Hey ladies, I just noticed y'all were over there. And one of those things was that when He gives me opportunity to step up and to speak, that I will do it, which is not always an easy thing. And not just that, once I accepted that part, I was like, okay, Lord, we can do that. I will do that. He got real intense and said, now you're going to share what you're going through right now. Because I've been doing my online lessons for a long time, and I've been to a lot of Bible studies, and I've grown up in church, so I know those stories really well. And I feel pretty good that I could stand up here and recount those details to you. But that's not what God is going to let me do. He said, you are going to teach what I'm showing you right now. And that's important. It's an important thing for us to do, but it doesn't come out polished. And it doesn't always come out pretty, but it does come out real, and it comes out honest. So I'm just a mom and a wife who loves Jesus and tries to serve Him in all the ways that she possibly can. So that's where I'm coming from with everything that I say to you tonight. When Miss Betty actually gave me plenty of warning, she told me back a few months ago that she wanted me to speak. And in the beginning of December, I was starting to study the Book of Ruth. And it was on December 2nd was our anniversary. Ben and I have been married 15 years. So I was going to do this cute little Facebook post, about our 15th anniversary. Because, 15 is a big deal. I know some people here have been married much longer than that. But it's a big deal to me. And so I was like, I'm studying the Book of Ruth. And it's, about this Prince Charming Boaz. I got to craft me a good little Facebook post to go along with this. Everybody's just going to love it. And I started typing it up, and I heard, Eve. And at some point in my life, I'm going to like that noise when it happens. But I'm not there yet. So when that happened, I was like, oh, I do need to be careful how I phrase this. Because, on social media, Ben's going to get a text message about who is Boaz and why is Stacey with him, and there's going to be a lot of confusion about my post. So I started again because I wanted to be real clear that Ruth got Boaz and I got Ben, and we're all still very happy. So I started typing again, and I heard, you might not want to do that. And this time I realized it's not just me. And that it's God saying, wait a minute. And when I paused and I said, is this you, Lord? And I just felt Him say, what do you know about Boaz? And I was like, well, what I know about Boaz is he's the hero of the story. He is the Prince Charming, right? The story tells us that he was a noble man, a prominent man. He was a man of good character. So, that seems pretty good. He takes care of all of us. I think he's a person of good character. Like, Lord, why would you not want me to say that? It's like, well, what happened to Boaz? It's like, well, he got married. They had a baby. They were happy. And I heard it again. And so then I was like, okay, what happened to Boaz, Because when the book of Ruth ends, it doesn't really tell us. So I had to really quickly, pull up the Google search and get it going. What happened to Boaz? And when you look at things, in the Old Testament, from a different time period, from a different culture, you kind of have to be careful because there's some crazy stuff on the internet. But the places that I usually go to look, I begin to see some conflicting information. And the thing that really upset me the most was I saw a few accounts that they believed that after Ruth got pregnant, And before the baby was born, Boaz died. And that just really messed up my whole Facebook post. Because how am I supposed to, make this great comparison? And it's really a tragedy. And so then I'm like frantically searching, trying to figure out, is this site true or is this site true? Some people say it just wasn't important to the story. They go on, blah, blah, blah. But my whole world was upset that morning. And I was like, okay, let me get this Facebook post on there. Happy 15th anniversary. We got to move on. And I felt like the Lord said, it's time to go back and study the Book of Ruth. So, I know everybody in here has probably read the book. It's only 4 chapters long. It's not a lengthy read. I'm sure y'all probably done Bible studies on it. I mean, our 2 heroes of the Old Testament are Ruth and Esther, right? I mean, it's just where we go. So, I'm diving back in to study the Book of Ruth, mainly because I want to know what happened to Boaz, because I'm really, really concerned. So, let's start at the beginning of Ruth. And when we read this, when they first start, now I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but when they first get started, just to get us all on the same page, we've got Elimelech, which is the husband. We've got Naomi, which is really confusing because the book is called Ruth, right? They could have called it Naomi. It would have been a lot easier. But we have these 2 people that are married. They are, for all we know, fairly wealthy individuals. They have to leave their land because of famine, and they find themselves in Moab. They have 2 sons that went with them. Now, at some point, tragedy strikes, and Elimelech dies. But she still has her 2 sons, who end up marrying Moabite women. So here we have some of God's people living in a foreign land. They've married foreign women, and tragedy strikes again because both of those sons die. Now this is when I started to study it, realized a very complex situation. And we think about, their laws, we think 10 commandments, but there are actually tons of laws, and they have so many clauses and ordinances. If this thing happens, then that thing happens, and it is so confusing to my brain. But the things that we need to know are, we have 3 ladies left and no men to take care of them. We have 3 ladies left and no way to survive. So Naomi starts to talk to her daughter-in-laws, and she tells them that she loves them. They are wonderful. It's time to go back to your families. I have nothing to give you. I have nothing left to give. And they cry and they're upset. I mean, it's just something from a movie. I can imagine the emotion, right? And they're like, no, we don't want to leave you. And then again, she says to them, she tells them, return home. I think this is in verse 11. It says, return home, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Am I able to have more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. Go on, for I'm too old to have another husband, and even if so, and even if I thought there was still hope for me to have a husband tonight and bear a son, would you be willing to wait for him to grow up? So go on with your lives. You still have a shot to have something. And Orpah is always the one we villainize because she decides to go back to her family. I think she made the logical choice. She made a decision that probably most of us would have made. We look at the facts, we weigh out the pros and cons, and we do what makes sense. But what really gets amazing is Ruth's response in this situation. And I want to read that to you in verse 16. She replied, don't plead with me to abandon you or return and not follow you. And Ruth starts making some really strong promises at this point, because she says, for wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you live, I will live. She's made her these promises. And then she takes it up a notch. And she says, your people will be my people. That's because she was a Moabite woman who has lived as part of this family, but still within her own country. But now she is saying, no, your people are my people now. I'm joining your group. And then she takes it even further because she says, your God will be my God. Now, the whole nature of their relationship at this point has changed. It has gone from extended family or close family. That's like when you start making a promise with God, with somebody, and you're looking, that's tying into like a covenant type relationship. This is deep. Ruth has seen something in her time with this family as she has watched Naomi, as she has seen her grieve the loss of her husband, as she has watched her lose her 2 sons, as she has seen what they do through the death process, how they honor the dead in their culture. And somewhere along the way, Ruth said, that sun god that I've been worshiping over here in Moab, that's not getting it. I need this God. I'm going with you. And she's so sincere. She says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And she even says, it's like almost a curse on herself. She said, may the Lord punish me and do so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. So Ruth is taking this relationship super serious. I mean, how many of us would be willing to join our mother-in-law in a quest like this? I mean, even if you have a really good mother-in-law, this is asking a lot. But Ruth does it. Willingly, it's what she wants. And so finally Naomi relents, and she's going to allow her to go. So chapter 2 is where it gets really good, because that's where Boaz shows up, and he's the hero of the story, right? So they're traveling along. They finally get back. They're here in this new land, right? Now the roles have changed. You had Naomi, who was a foreigner in this land. Now she's come home, and Ruth is the foreigner. And so they're also poor and completely destitute and living in poverty, right? And she tried to tell her, you shouldn't go with me, but she did anyways. And it comes time to figure out, how are we going to survive, right? Now, I'm sure that they could go over to some neighbors. People came out and greeted Naomi. They remembered her. They knew who she was. I'm sure they could have went around and asked for some scraps. Some friends would have delivered a meal so that they would certainly have something to eat. But they have to come up with another plan. As is customary within this Jewish culture, they have these fields. And we would think you're going to go to somebody's field and pick up stuff out of their field, their leftovers, and that's how you're going to provide food for yourselves. This is a terrible idea. The police are going to arrest you. But that's not the way it worked in their culture. They allowed those that didn't have any other provision. They allowed those that had nothing else, that had no one else, to come and to pick up these pieces. So it wasn't like a crazy thing. Apparently to Ruth, it was a crazy thing, because she says to Naomi, Ruth the Moabitess says, Naomi, even me, may I go in the field and do this? So Ruth has come into this foreign land, into this other culture, and she's aware that she's different than everybody else. She's not like them. And she wants to know, am I allowed to go and do this too? I love Naomi's response at this point, because it shifted. And she says to her, go ahead, my daughter. So she doesn't see her as a foreigner, and she doesn't see her as a daughter-in-law anymore. She is now her daughter. And I think it's so important to see that transition that has happened. Now, Boaz comes into the field, and he notices Ruth. probably because she's a foreigner. She doesn't look like the other ladies, right? Catches that attention really quick. She doesn't belong. She's new here. Why is she here? He asks around, and he hears that she is a woman of great character because she has cared for her mother-in-law. She did all the things that were expected within their community and their culture of the way to celebrate and commemorate those who have passed on. She did all those things. So he already is coming in with a high opinion of who Ruth is. Now, as they continue on, and we're going to just keep going right on into chapter 3, right? Ruth comes to Naomi, and she's telling Naomi about Boaz and about finding favor, and she's welcome not just to pick up what is left, but go ahead and walk along beside the others. No one's going to mess with you. There is protection here for you, and all of those are wonderful things that Boaz has done. And Naomi realizes that this is a very important time for Ruth because she is going to transition from just being Ruth, who came in from the outside, who wasn't part. She has earned her way in. And the community is now accepting her and finding a place for her. Now, Naomi starts to teach Ruth further. Well, now, Ruth, this is what you've got to do. You're going to go to the threshing floor. And he's going to be asleep. He's going to fall asleep. You're going to uncover his feet. You're going to lay down by his feet. I do not understand this culture at all, is what I have discovered. Because if Naomi is giving me the advice to go within a farming community and to the feet of someone who probably walks around in sandals amongst his fields, and while he is asleep, after he has eaten, after he has had some wine, lay down at his feet and uncover them. Maybe it's to see if you can handle whatever comes your way. No, it just sounds terrible, right? There's a whole other way you can go with all of these things. That's not the point. The point is, Ruth went to Naomi. Naomi imparted wisdom to her about their culture, about how they did things, and it continued to help Ruth. It continued to guide and direct her life to a destiny that is yet to come. And so once we have this weird feet uncovering incident, I guess, Boaz is like, well, if she likes my feet, we're probably good. And so he is now wanting to pursue her, right? He wants to be able to be their redeemer, is how we see it written here. Now, I know in literary terms, we use type and shadow sometimes, and I understand that it can be seen as our redeemer and how Jesus comes in and saves us. I get all that, but I don't think that is the point of what we're talking about today. That is not the point of what God was trying to show me in this story. Boaz was not the only one. There was another person who was really in line before him. And in one translation, I love it because it refers to him as the so-and-so. And I just would hate if I made it into Bible times and I was recorded as so-and-so. So he must have really not been very special at all. But he was the next person in line who would have had a right to purchase the land and to marry Ruth and to take care of Naomi. But he did not want to do that. He said, I'll pass. It's going to mess up my other inheritance. So I'm going to leave that. And this gave Boaz the opportunity to do just that. And so all of the ladies in the town see what has happened. I want to read you these verses because they got really excited. They saw what was happening. Again, it's so foreign and bizarre to us how they operated, what their customs were. I try to see it in my head as to how this must have panned out when the so-and-so shows up and they're talking back and forth, and then there's all these ladies that are watching what is happening as well, and what they must think and what that climate must be like in comparison to how we live, and to the things that we see. So I just think that's very funny to try to see how does that play out. And they're excited that, yes, Ruth has been chosen. And I think they're excited too because that is something for Naomi. And she was their friend. And they loved her and they cared about her. And they're seeing something good starting to happen for her too. And so I think that all these ladies were super excited about this. Let me see if I can find my verse. I lost my place in my notes. You are witnesses today that I'm buying from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, as my wife. That is not the verse that I wanted to read to you. All the people who were at the city gate, there it is, verse 11. All the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. And when I read that verse, I just kind of stopped for a minute because I suddenly realized that Boaz doesn't really matter in the story. I mean, I'm sure Boaz was a great guy. He did some nice things, but he didn't really matter. He could have been so-and-so. What really mattered in this story was a woman named Naomi who loved God, who served God. Even in a foreign country, she maintained her faith. She maintained her traditions. She continued to live for him. So much so that her daughter-in-law left her own family. That's a big deal. And wanted to join with her. Naomi is the hero of the story. Because we have these cute little posters that tell us, you know, you can't give what you don't have. You can't pour out from an empty vessel. And I get where they're coming from, but Naomi did it. Naomi was empty. Can you imagine the grief as a wife and a mother to lose your husband and your sons? She probably wanted the daughter-in-laws to leave her alone so she could curl up in a ball and die somewhere. Ruth clung to her. And that probably is what kept Naomi going. The fact that she had someone counting on her. So here we have Naomi. She has nothing to give. She's in poverty. They don't know how they're going to eat. And she gave anyways. The one thing that she had, and that was her faith. The most amazing thing to me in this story is Naomi is giving from her own lack, right? But what happens is at the end of the story, it even said, you know, after Boaz comes and they get married and Ruth is pregnant and she has a baby, it says in verse 15, no, let me back up. I'm going to start in verse 17 and 13. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The women, these same women who've been watching Naomi this whole time, those same women said, Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name become well known in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. This baby that has been born through Ruth, her adopted daughter, if you will, right? an amazing thing about this Jewish culture that I still don't understand, but like God owns the land and he designated out the different territories to the tribes and the clans. So when Boaz, who's not the hero of the story, paid for the land, it went back to the rightful owners of Elimelech. So it is like in their culture, in their custom, legally, if you will, this is Naomi's grandson flowing through that same family line, that same thing that she thought she had lost, that she would never have a chance at. She has an heir. She has a grandchild. Legally, within their structure, that's the way they see it. Adopted wise, in her heart, from her daughter Ruth at this point, she has that child. And it says, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Naomi took that child and placed him in her lap, and she took care of him. She became his nanny. She spent those days of joy with him. Why did she get to end her days with happiness and joy and celebration, full of life? Because she gave when she didn't have anything else to give. That is a hard thing to do. But as wives and as moms, we know how to do that. Because it is taxing sometimes. It is emptying sometimes. But you give anyways. You don't give from the surplus of what you have. Sometimes you give from the bottom of your heart. And sometimes all that is the faith that you have in God. And if you will do that, if you are willing to look around you and find the Ruth that God has placed near you, find that Ruth and pray for her and check in on her. Maybe it seems weird to her at first. Why did I get a note from this person who says that they're praying for me? But we have new people coming in. We have some people who've been around for a long time. It is time for you ladies, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Please don't take it the wrong way. But I'm saying to you, you are our Naomis. You ladies are the heroes of Oak Forest. Because Pastor Rick is doing a phenomenal job with pastoring the church, with his sermons, with everything he's reorganizing within us administratively, for us as staff. He's doing an awesome job. But he could be the Boaz of the story. So to speak. Or a so-and-so. Right? He's not the hero of the story. You ladies are the hero of the story. Because even though these last couple years have been hard with COVID, even though these last couple years have been hard for Oak Forest, with the losses that we have seen within our own congregation, within our own families, you have the opportunity to mold and shape the Ruths that are around you. And are they always going to do it exactly like you tell them to? Maybe not. Because maybe they'll think Boaz's feet are gross and they go to the right instead of the left, but it'll be close enough. And if you do that, then at some point, God steps in and it flips. And it becomes the Naomi who gets everything she thought she had lost. Not just Ruth in getting the husband and the son. So find your Ruth. Some of you might still be a Ruth, and you might need a Naomi. Sometimes we do both of those roles. But don't be afraid to give to somebody else just because you feel like you don't know how or you don't know what. Because if you pray and you ask God, He will show you what those people need. He will show you what you have within you that they need. And sometimes your greatest pain and your greatest suffering and that thing that you don't want to talk about is the exact thing that someone else needs to hear because they're barely hanging on. Don't be afraid to be the Naomi. Because I promise you, if you do that faithfully, God will step in. And he will give back to you the very thing that you thought you would never